Hello and welcome to today's episode that deals with the functions of the staff, editorial, advertising and circulation department of a newspaper. I am Sakshi Mandwal and the subject expert today is Renu Agal, who has worked as a journalist for over 2 decades in national and international organizations in both print and radio. She is now an independent journalist. In today's program, we will look at the functions of the staff working in a newspaper. We will try and understand the role of different departments like editorial, advertising and circulation in the life cycle of a newspaper. We will also see how these various departments, though independent of each other, are also very dependent on each other for efficient functioning. Every morning, when the newspaper reaches your doorstep, you enjoy the day's news and views with your morning cup of tea. You discuss the contents during the day with your friends and colleagues. But all you talk about is the news you have read. But there is more to a newspaper than the team which brings you the news. It is the people who help sell the newspaper and those who get advertising for the newspaper, who also are equal partners in making it happen. But let us begin by looking at what the editorial department does. The editorial department takes care of the news content of a newspaper. You could call it the brain of the newspaper. It comprises the newsroom where news is received from all the possible sources. The news comes from local sources, apart from news from the region, the whole country, and international news. This could come from news agencies like PTI or UNI or other wire services, or the newspaper's local reporters, correspondents, stringers, and other news sources like the internet and television. Within the newsroom, there is a broad classification of news in terms of political news, agricultural news, development news, international news, financial and business news, sports news, and so on. Once the newsroom receives the news from its various sources, it turns them into news reports, features, columns, and comment pieces. Heading the editorial department is the editor, who can be variously called managing editor, executive editor, or the resident editor. This is the person who has the final responsibility for what goes into a newspaper. He is the public face of the newspaper. Under him, there are various departments with their heads like political editor, features editor, business editor, city or sports editor, and so on. Under them are the assistant editors, chief sub-editors, senior subs, and sub-editors. They constitute what is called the desk and give final shape to all that goes into print. There is also a team of reporters who form the reporting desk, which has the bureau chief, chief reporters, special correspondents, and reporters. They are considered the backbone of the newspaper, as they give character to a newspaper. They provide exclusives, write investigative reports, provide news content and features which define the style of the newspaper. Newspapers are known by the kind of reporters it has, as it reflects on the quality of stories they do. All of them form a part of the newsroom which can only run when each clog in the wheel works in close coordination. So, every employee in a newsroom coordinates closely with his colleague and is also dependent on him or her to work efficiently. The managing editors are usually those who supervise, mediate, and arbiter. They hire and fire, sanction projects, keep peace amongst the staff, and liaise and coordinate with other departments of a newspaper. They are the face of the newspaper for the outside world, and they get their job done by hiring the right lieutenants. The national editor gets a list of big stories for the day. He chooses and assigns the reporter to do certain stories. Then, he lists the story which the news editor sees along with all the other inputs from other editors. He then designs the page layout, decides what goes where, and what kind of space has to be given to a particular story. The managing or resident editor gets to know of the plan in an editorial meeting and gives the agenda his approval. Readers are naturally attracted to the photographs in a newspaper. It could be of a horrendous train accident, a stunning photograph of a heroine in a film premiere, or that stupendous six which won India last night's cricket match. These are all generated in the photo department. Here the staff photographers work according to assignments given by the picture editor. He in turn gets to know of pictures needed by the city reporter or the chief reporter or the features person. The photo department also helps in selecting news pictures from agency material and has a fully equipped lab for their work. Often the picture department works in tandem with the editorial to do photo features or click special features for weekend editions. Apart from this, there is the design team which can have a cartoonist, illustrator and a graphic designer. These are the people who look after the look of the paper. They help not just in deciding the basic look of the paper, but also actively participate with the advertising department to bring out special supplements. Some newspapers use illustrations as a regular feature, while for some, a cartoon is a must. In a newsroom, every person responsible for the news input is indispensable for its smooth functioning. A newspaper cannot come out with nicely edited and corrected news items collected from various sources and places on varied subjects unless each arm of the newsroom doesn't work in close cooperation. Each newspaper gets printed with the help of sub-editors, reporters and various editors. Each has a specific role assigned and all have to deliver to make it work. This could all go to waste if the efforts put in by the editorial are not ably backed by the advertising department of the newspaper. After all, no business model can work without revenue generation. A newspaper typically generates 70 to 80% of its revenue from advertising. The rest comes usually from sales and subscriptions. This department is critical because it provides with the revenues needed to sustain a newspaper. There are various means through which the advertising department gets revenue. There is a sales team whose job is to push the newspaper as an advertising vehicle of choice. They look for advertising and media buying agencies who act on behalf of their clients and also approach clients directly. The team accepts and processes orders from advertisers to book space in newspapers, create advertisements. They provide advertising agencies with statistics and information about the circulation and readership of the newspaper, which in turn helps the advertiser to decide to give advertisements. It works in close coordination with the editorial teams to create appropriate space in the newspaper. The department carries out a number of functions which include accepting and processing orders from advertisers, creating advertisements, providing media information to advertisers and advertising agencies, helping business develop advertising plans, and working with editorial teams to develop features that will attract advertisers or help clients place their products with a coordinated editorial write-up. The advertisements in the paper can be the display or classified advertisements, which are primarily text only. Sometimes they may have some photographs. The classified advertisements come in specific sections of the newspaper and cost lesser than main ads. They are categorized in various subsections. These advertisements are accepted through emails or classified depots or via telephone, as it is mostly used by lay readers. They are a strong revenue earning area of the newspaper and their growth is almost limitless. They form the major chunk of advertising income of most newspapers. Display advertisements are more comprehensive and appear in the editorial section of newspapers, complete with illustrations and text designed by professionals. A newspaper sometimes offers copywriting and design services to a product which wants to advertise but doesn't have an agency to do so. Usually, these services are given at nominal rates and sometimes offered for free. They usually are of retail goods, institutional, cooperative and promotional in nature. They can be of a local area or more general ones from other areas which usually also have a higher rate. There are also legal notice advertisements which include public accounting notices, information giving notices and warning notices like divorce notice, economic offences notices and so on. The advertising department also produces a rate card for its advertising space. The rates of advertisement depend on a newspaper's circulation, its frequency of publication, its ranking, and it also depends on the profile of its readers. The rate card specifies advertisement rates depending on the size of the advertisements. There are also discounted rates for multiple bookings across different editions. Sometimes, special rates are offered by newspapers to attract advertisers. They can work with the editorial team to develop topic-specific content. Often, specials are created to generate ads like travel or education specials, which help newspapers generate advertising from companies, products, and services from that sector. So, the advertisement department supports the survival and success of the newspaper as a commercial venture. So, the types of advertisements it gets are classified, display, black and white ads, color ads, specified position ads, gatefold ads, government ads, advertorial and advertisement under box numbers. All of us often hear or read about tall claims made by some newspapers. Some claim to have large circulations. Some say they have the largest readership. Some talk of how they are the market leaders. These claims are supported by the Audit Bureau of Circulation reports. The advertising rates in a newspaper are also dependent on its circulation figure. The more circulation a newspaper has, the higher the advertising rates it can demand. However, one should not make the mistake of equating circulation with the number of copies sold, since some copies of newspapers are distributed for free as a promotional tool. Also, the readership figures of a newspaper are not same as the circulation figure. It is often higher because a newspaper is very often read by more than one person. One can argue that there are also many copies which are distributed specially to those which are distributed free and no one reads them. The circulation department is usually headed by an executive. It is an important position since a newspaper's rise or fall is decided on the basis of the number of people who read it and also on the number of readers it can hold on to. This manager usually has responsibility of managing a city and area circulation and sales promotions. City circulation involves maintenance of circulation records for the city of publication. Carrier boys are recruited, supervised and reimbursed. The carrier boys are very important in Indian cities because most people get their newspapers delivered at home. Apart from it, there are those who look after circulation in various areas of the city. They are in charge of moving papers to the newsstands and building long-term relations with the newsstand operators. Area circulation means making sure the newspapers reach areas that are situated near the city of publication. They have to ensure that the copies reach those places. They also run taxis and tempos to reach out to far-flung areas so that newspapers are distributed on time. The circulation manager is also in charge of moving the papers into the appropriate distribution channels as they move into the distribution room from the press. The sales promotion team plays a crucial role in the circulation department. It keeps records and notifies subscribers when their subscription needs renewal. They handle complaints and renewal requests, new subscriptions over the counter and also on the mail. Those who deal with promotions are essentially like the public relations officers. Usually, there is a separate group of people looking after promotions and they bring out promotion policies after consultation with the approval of the publisher. These promotions are often done in collaboration with other departments. The circulation manager deals with the audit bureau of circulation. He has to keep it informed of the number of copies which haven't been sold. He also provides the circulation details to the registrar of newspapers. The registrar has to be assured that the newsprint consumption of the newspaper is in proportion to its printing capacity and circulation. The registrar has to be assured that all payments are received from the agents and are also credited to the newspaper account. The registrar is also given the full details of the transportation of the newspaper. Promotion of circulation in various territories and amongst various groups is undertaken by offering discounts, gifts and other offers. The circulation department also suggests to the proprietors the scope and usefulness of bringing new editions based on the competition in the market. They do a periodical SWOT, that is, strength, weakness, opportunities and threat analysis. They also train and motivate the agents and hawkers to get better sales results. They also undertake readership surveys and make sure newspapers are delivered on time and orders are met promptly. The size of population doesn't always determine the volume of circulation. Some communities with big populations turn out to be poor newspaper subscribers. Some small communities end up subscribing heavily. So it also depends on the economic condition of the people, the rates of literacy and the kind of coverage provided by the newspaper which leads to good or bad circulation figures. Another important factor is the cost of the newspaper and where it stands in comparison to its competitors. For most people, the public face of the newspaper is its editors and reporters as their bylines are recognized. Within a newspaper, most people visualize their jobs as little islands which have nothing to do with other departments most of the time. But in reality, it is not so, as every department of the newspaper is dependent on the other directly or indirectly. What makes a newspaper a success is its strong journalism provided by the editorial department. Armed with a solid content, it is ready to take on the rivals. But the story is never that simple. There are numerous examples of papers with great journalism which make a mark but fail to sell. So despite good content, newspapers can fail in making money for the proprietors. However, For the proprietor, it is a business which needs to generate revenues as he wants to see profits. For this to happen, the newspaper has to sell, and it has to sell in large numbers. It is here that the circulation department plays a role. A good circulation manager should also have a nose for news and reach out to areas where the newspaper has good coverage from. Also, he can, in conjunction with the editor, chart out a plan of coverage. Say, a newspaper is planning an edition from a new small city. It has to make sure that there is enough local content which will pull readers to its fold. Since advertisements earn the real money for the newspapers and not its sale, ultimately the success of a newspaper depends on the number of advertisements it gets and the rate at which it gets these advertisements. These advertisement rates again depend on circulation of a newspaper. The higher the circulation figures, the better the potential to get advertisements at higher rates. So, it is clear that the various departments are interdependent on each other and need to work in close coordination for a healthy bottom line. Let us talk to the Deputy Editor of Governance now, Mr. Ashish Mehta, who has had a long experience of newspaper journalism. What interaction happens on a daily basis between the editorial and other departments like advertising and circulation?
What happens is that once in a while we have formal meetings of the advertising manager or circulation manager sitting along with editorial people. But mostly what happens is that this is in a small organization, we interact all the time informally, so we keep each other informed. So advertising people also know what are the editorial topics we are working on and they can plan accordingly. So it is more informal meetings on daily basis.
Do organizations with better synergy work better, or does it really have no impact?
Yes, synergy is a very crucial factor, but for that it would happen that the two departments will be working at cross purpose. So there has to be synergy, and advertising people or circulation people would expect inputs from editorial and vice versa. So synergy is a major issue.
Which department of a newspaper, according to you, plays a more important part in its success?
It has to be editorial. The other departments have to complement its efforts, but the main effort has to come from editorial, or a product's personality or its attributes will come from editorial drive. So I think editorial is the most important department, because finally it is the content of the magazine or product or that is going to decide its success. Advertising, circulation, marketing, response, other departments can only complement the efforts of the editorial, but overall profile of the publication is decided by editorial.
How do you see editorials? Are they a threat to good journalism, or is it a necessity?
As of now, it is shaping up as a kind of trend, but we are not in favor of it. It's difficult to say threat, or because these are survival techniques for smaller organizations, but editorials as such is finally you are dealing with the trust of the reader. So better idea is to do editorials but with full disclosure, when you tell the reader that this part is paid for.
Should newspapers work on a profit motive or as a social service to disseminate information?
There was time when news journalism products worked like social service, but that was before 90s. These days it would be difficult to survive as a social service. For example, if they are going to pay me the kind of salaries paid in the market, how they are going to make money for that? And I need those salaries to put my children into the right kind of schools. So it's the whole economy in which I am placed, because of which the magazine will also have to have, the news product will have to have profit motive.
Do you see newspaper readership growing or slowly fading in this era of internet?
internet is becoming major or even first source of information for many, especially the young readers, and that's the growing market. So probably the trend is towards internet. But in recent years, I don't think print media has gone down. Print media is also expanding with rising literacy.
That was Ashish Mehta, Deputy Editor of Governance Now. In this episode, we looked at how the editorial department of a newspaper functions and generates the content for a newspaper. We saw how it is important for the editorial team to understand the demands of the market and the advertising team to generate advertisement revenues. We saw how fortunes of a newspaper are made not by earnings from newspaper sales, but from the selling of a space in a newspaper. How selling newspapers helps the advertising department attract more advertisements and gives the editorial more economic freedom to practice good journalism. Lastly, and most importantly, a newspaper runs on the efficient and coordinated efforts of all its departments to make it a success. This is all we have for you in this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good day.